Our first step in Act 1 is the first 10 pages. Now, a lot of people say that this is the most important part of your script if you're a new writer. The general feeling is that if after 10 pages the reader or the producer is not engaged with your material, he or she will probably stop reading there and move on to the next one. They haven't got time to waste to see if it gets any better. So the first 10 is where you've got to really engage them in the story. So what needs to go into this first 10? Well, we need to introduce the hero, the stakes character, and the villain, or something that represents the villain, as well as give an overall sense of the genre, feel of the movie, and any information we need about the story world so that the reader understands it. Now this sounds a lot, but let's go through it step by step. The first one is the hero, and our hero is certainly the most important. As we talked about in a few lectures ago, we need to connect with our hero and create empathy with them, and this needs to be done in the first 10 pages. So we can use all the techniques we learned in the protagonist section. If you can't remember them, just go and recap that. And then we can implement these in the first 10 to create someone unique, but someone that the audience will stick with throughout the story. In the first 10, we should also see the hero in their ordinary world, which is a name that Joseph Campbell called it. This means we see them how they're truly living at that specific moment in time. So we see their inner conflict or possibly their ghost. We see their values, we see their faults and their moral compass. So this is the before picture prior to the journey that the movie's going to take us on. So before any transformational arc or anything, it's the beginning point of them. The next important on our list is the antagonist. You don't necessarily have to see the villain themselves in the first 10 pages, but we should see a representation of the antagonistic force. So maybe we see someone stealing nuclear codes, or maybe a heist, or someone being cut to shreds by an unknown being, or something like that. Whatever it is, the audience should know up front that the opposition the hero is going to face is daunting. It's going to be a challenging mission for them to reach their goal. If it's a namby-pamby weak villain, then the hero's got no competition, so it's going to be a boring movie. Very often we're going to set up the stakes character as well in the first 10. As you can probably remember, the stakes character is the human embodiment of the stakes in relation to the hero. So if the hero fails, the stakes character dies. A lot of times the stakes character is actually one of the hero's family or acquaintances. So we can combine meeting the stakes character with information about the hero themselves. A quick example is Brian Mills. The stakes character in Taken is his daughter Kim. And we learn about Brian's past, his inner conflict and his character all through the first couple of scenes with Kim that deals with his relationship with Kim. So we know that he's ex-CIA and his marriage is broken down because of his work. He's been all over the world and he's almost neglected his daughter. We now know he's quit his job and moved to be near his daughter, but he doesn't know her that well. They're kind of in that almost awkward stage. He still thinks of her as a little girl and not the young lady that she is. And we also know that he's overprotective and can be overbearing. So this is a good snapshot. This is the ordinary world that we see Brian in at the moment. A technique many movies use is something called an overture scene. And this is the very first thing that we've seen, and it's especially apparent in action and horror films. So here we see the hero, villain, or the representation of the villain in a really engaging and entertaining way that gives a really good kick into the movie. It's a mini encapsulation of what the story will be about without having to go into too much detail. So, for example, in an action movie, you could start off with a high-octane sequence filled with explosions, or you could see the villain's plan in action where someone's stealing nuclear codes or doing a heist, such as in Batman: The Dark Knight. While in a horror, we might see a deadly curse or an exorcism gone wrong or a gruesome tale of some kind. It can also incorporate the hero's ghost, which, if you remember rightly, is the past event which has led to their inner conflict. Here's a few examples of overture scenes so that you get the idea. The first one in our horror section is The Hills Have Eyes, and here we see a group of scientists who are killed by the hillbillies. So, this has got no further plot significance at all. I mean, the scientists are not seen again. But what it does do is it introduces straight away to the bad guys, to the villains, the hillbillies, and their murderous nature. So it gives us a feel of the movie straight away. The same can be said for Wrong Turn. In the opening minute or so, we see a couple of climbers who are pulled up over the lip of the rock face and are killed by these unseen people, which we will later know are like the cannibals that live in the mountainside. So again, this serves as an introduction, and we instantly know what kind of film it is. The third example we've got is The Exorcism of Molly Hartley. And here we've got Devon Sawa, who plays a priest who tries to exorcise a demon from a pregnant lady. But it all goes wrong, and he doesn't do it properly, and he releases her. And then because of this, another priest is killed, and the lady herself falls to her death. So we know what the movie's about. We know it's going to be about the demons and exorcisms, but it also gives us a good sight into our hero. And at the same time, it's showing us his ghost and his inner conflict, which was caused by this event. So we're getting a huge triple whammy of things here that in the space of a very, very short time has actually given us a lot of information, but in an entertaining way. Next, we've got examples of overture scenes in action films. The first is San Andreas, and this starts with The Rock, who's showing off his all-round action hero skills. He pilots this helicopter into a ravine to rescue a girl whose car's gone off over the edge, and it's hanging precariously. And it's got no further plot significance at all. I mean, the rest of the movie is about a huge earthquake, so it's got absolutely no plot relevance, but it just shows us the genre we're in, and it shows our hero and his all-around action super skills. Now contrast what we've just said about San Andreas with Cliffhanger. I remember watching Cliffhanger years and years and years and years ago when it first came out, and the overture scene still sticks with me even today. What I think it does that's a lot better than San Andreas is it links our hero with his ghost and his inner conflict. At the start of this movie, we've got Sylvester Stallone's friend Hal, who's taken his girlfriend up to this really, really high bit of mountain. The fiance's halfway across the zip wire when one of the buckles goes on her safety harness, and she's clinging on the zip line for dear life. Anyway, Gabe, who's Sylvester Stallone's character, goes on the wire to rescue her. He reaches her hand and she grabs his hand, but the glove comes off and she slips and she falls to her death. Now, it's a very, very tense scene, like San Andreas, but I think better than San Andreas personally. But what's so good about it is we don't expect it. We expect him to save her. And it's therefore one of the most memorable openings I've ever seen, because she actually plummets to her death. So we instantly empathise with Gabe because of this. We're connecting with him because we empathise with him. We know how he must feel that he went out against his friend Hal's wishes on the line to save this woman, and he didn't manage to save her. But it also provides the ghost which he'll struggle with throughout the rest of the movie. And it shows his inner conflict of guilt because of this. Should he have gone on the line? Should he have stayed on the side of the mountain and just tried to get her another way? Was it his weight that actually made her fall? This is his guilt, and this is what he'll have to get over. The next one we've got is The Mummy. Now here the overture scene is slightly different. It's very entertaining, but it's actually the backstory of Imhotep, who is the antagonist of the movie. He's the mummy. It's a great way to quickly bring the audience up to speed with the period and setting and giving us a bit of history, but it's also really, really engaging and brings us right into the heart of the story itself. So it's another use of the overture scene, but it's done very well. And finally, no list can be complete without a bit of indie. This is Raiders of the Lost Ark. And this overture scene everybody knows it. It's an amazing scene. And it gives us a huge insight into the character and the genre, which is what we're really trying to do. Here we see Indy. He's travelled into the depths of the jungle and he's to capture that golden idol. And all the while he's covered in the huge spiders, those scary spiders. He's nearly squashed by that massive boulder. There's booby traps. And when he eventually gets out, he's got these natives with poison darts aimed at him. And we see our villain as well, Belloc. So it's really entertaining. It gives us a fantastic idea of our hero and the villain, and it hints at all the fun and excitement we're going to have over the next 90 minutes. So if in doubt, always look to indie. It's great. Following on from what we've just said, there's an important point I really want to reinforce. This sounds very silly, I know, but make sure that by the time the reader's got a few pages into your script, they already know what kind of movie they're in for. So as we've seen, the overture is really very good at doing this in a succinct way, but it doesn't always have to be used. So think about how you can show the reader what genre you're writing in. So is your script a comedy, a horror, or a sci-fi or an action movie? It sounds really simple, but you'd be surprised how many people don't actually do this. Have a look at your DVD collection, for example. If you're watching a comedy, I bet there's quite a few jokes in the first couple of minutes or something funny happens. If you're watching a horror, there's going to be a few jumps or very tense scenes. And if you're watching an action, there's going to be some action. So all these movies put it in, and you really should as well. You've got to let your reader know what genre they're in and what they expect from the script. The other thing we have to be aware of is that depending on when and where your script's actually set or your story's set, you might need to give the audience some information about this story world, its rules and structure, so that it makes sense. Obviously to you it will make sense because you're the one that's created it, but think from someone else's point of view. Think from the reader's point of view. They don't know anything about your script. They don't know anything about the story world that you're creating here. So if there's something that's important that they need to know to understand what's going on, you need to put that in. Now this is called exposition, and we'll discuss it a bit later on how to write this successfully. But for now, just think what you would need to include. So for example, do you need to give a brief history, such as in Underworld, where we see the long reigning battle between the werewolves and the vampires? If we hadn't seen that history, we hadn't been told what's going on, it wouldn't really make sense to us, would it? We'd be confused going in. So you don't want your audience to be confused. You want them to understand what's happening. Or maybe you need to explain how a certain technology works, such as how you can dive into people's dreams like they do in Inception. It doesn't have to be in one big block. Again, we'll talk about it a bit later, but it can be in little chunks that people can understand. So you don't want someone just blabbing it all to you in one big go, saying this is exactly what happens, this is how this works, this is how this works. It's got to be in an entertaining way, but it's got to happen so that the audience understands what's going on. Okay, now that we know what should be included in our first 10, which is what we've just discussed, what comes after that? And that's what we're going to discuss next.